I used to think that being home alone was no big deal. Growing up in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, I had my fair share of nights where my parents were out late, and I was left to watch TV, microwave some pizza rolls, and scroll endlessly on my phone. By the time I was in my 20s, staying alone in my own place was just another ordinary part of life. But there's this one night, a night I'll never forget, that made me question if I ever truly was alone when I thought I was. It happened 2 years ago, but the memory still clings to me like cigarette smoke that won't wash out of your clothes, no matter how many times you try. It was a Friday night, early autumn, one of those evenings where the air outside feels crisp but not freezing, the kind that makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and sip hot coffee. I had just moved into a small rental house outside of town, a little one-story place with creaky floors and outdated fixtures, but I liked it because it felt private. The backyard had this old wooden fence, half-rotten, and behind it was nothing but woods. My nearest neighbor was a good football field away, and at first, that felt peaceful, like I finally had space to breathe. But peace and isolation are cousins, and isolation has a way of twisting into something sinister when night falls. That evening, I remember ordering Chinese takeout, turning on a horror movie marathon, and telling myself it was going to be a perfect, lazy night. The house was quiet except for the TV humming in the background. Around 10 p.m., I paused the movie to use the bathroom, and that's when I first noticed it, the faintest sound of floorboards creaking somewhere down the hallway. My heart jumped, but I brushed it off. Old house, shifting foundation, maybe the wind rattling the siding. I went back to my movie and laughed at myself for being paranoid. But a little later, maybe closer to midnight, I heard something again, this time from the kitchen. A slow, dragging shuffle, like the sound of socks sliding across linoleum. I muted the TV instantly, holding my breath, straining to hear. The sound stopped. Nothing but silence filled the room, but my skin was buzzing, every hair on my arm standing upright. I told myself, you're imagining things. You've been watching scary movies for hours, you're just spooking yourself. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house wasn't as empty as I wanted it to be. I tried to keep watching TV, but I couldn't focus. My ears were tuned to every little sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the old wall clock, the occasional groan of the wooden beams in the ceiling. Then, as if the house wanted to prove me right, I heard it again. This time from the hallway closet, 3 distinct knocks. Not like wood settling, not like pipes expanding, but deliberate knocks. My stomach sank. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept near the couch, forcing myself to walk to the closet. My hand was trembling so hard that I almost dropped the bat. I yanked the closet door open, half expecting someone to leap out, but it was empty. Just coats, a vacuum cleaner, and a few boxes. I stood there for a long minute, clutching the bat, staring into that closet like it was a doorway to hell. Finally, I shut it and laughed nervously at myself again, trying to shake off the fear. But when I turned back toward the living room, I swear on everything, I saw a figure, just a faint silhouette, dart across the room and vanish into the hallway. My breath caught in my throat, and for the first time that night, I whispered out loud, "Hello?" There was no response. Every instinct told me to get the hell out of there, but my pride wouldn't let me. I didn't want to call the cops and risk them finding nothing, labeling me as some paranoid idiot. So instead, I started checking the rooms one by one. The bathroom was empty. My bedroom, empty. The spare room, empty. But when I got to the kitchen, I noticed something off. The back door, the one that led to the fenced yard, was unlocked. I knew I had locked it earlier that evening, because I always double-checked. My throat went dry. I locked it again, pushed a chair up under the handle, and backed away slowly. I decided right then to sleep in the living room with the lights on. I didn't care how childish it felt, I wasn't spending the night in that bedroom at the far end of the hallway. I curled up on the couch, the bat still in my hands, the glow of the TV flickering against the walls. At some point, despite the adrenaline, I drifted off into a shallow, restless sleep. When I woke up, it was around 3:30 in the morning, and the TV had switched to static. The room was bathed in a faint bluish glow, and for a second, I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep. Then I realized someone was breathing. Not me, not some noise from outside, but heavy, raspy breathing coming from behind the couch. I froze, every muscle locked tight, my mind screaming at me not to move. Slowly, ever so slowly, I turned my head, just enough to see over the back of the couch. And that's when I saw him. A man. Middle-aged, unshaven, eyes wide and gleaming in the dim light. He was crouched there, staring at me from the other side of the couch like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. My heart almost stopped. I screamed, jumped off the couch, and swung the bat wildly. He scrambled back, knocking into the coffee table, and then bolted down the hallway. I didn't chase him. I sprinted straight out the front door, barefoot, and ran to my neighbor's house. The police came, searched the place, and eventually found him. He had been hiding in the crawl space above the hallway closet, living there for God knows how long. They found blankets, empty food wrappers, and even a little notebook full of strange, obsessive scribbles about me, my schedule, the clothes I wore, the times I left the house. The thing that still makes me sick is how often he wrote the words "She doesn't know I'm here." The officers arrested him, and they told me later he was some drifter who had been squatting in empty houses for months. But here's the part that still chills me more than anything else. When they let him out in handcuffs, he turned to me, smiled with this cracked, broken grin, and said, "I wasn't the only one." I still don't know what he meant. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the shadows stretch long across the walls, I hear that same deliberate knocking in the hallway closet again. And I can't help but wonder, did they really find everyone who was living in my house? I've never told anyone this story, not even my closest friends. It's one of those things you tuck away in the back of your mind because it sounds too crazy, too unbelievable, and honestly too dark to ever say out loud. But after lurking on horror forums and reading other people's real experiences, I think it's time to let mine out. This happened when I was 17, back when I was doing babysitting gigs in my small Ohio town. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where you're more likely to run into deer on the road than actual danger. But sometimes the scariest things don't come from the woods, or the strangers, they come from inside the house. It was a Saturday night, early winter, when I got a last-minute call from the Parkers, a family I had sat for a few times before. They lived in this big colonial-style home on the edge of town, all white siding and black shutters, the kind of place that looks straight out of a magazine. They had 2 kids, both under 10, and usually it was an easy job. Pizza, a movie, bedtime by 9, then I'd sit in their oversized living room scrolling my phone until the parents came back. That night, though, Mr. Parker had called in a rush. His wife had fallen sick and needed to be taken to the hospital. He didn't want to drag the kids out in the snowstorm, so could I please come right away? Of course, I said yes. The Parkers paid well, and I honestly liked their kids. When I got there, the snow had already started falling heavy, blanketing the quiet neighborhood. Mr. Parker looked frazzled, coat half on, car keys jangling in his hand. He barely gave me instructions, just a quick rundown that the kids were already fed, they could watch TV for a bit, bedtime at 9 sharp, and that he'd call me if there were any updates. Then he was gone, tires crunching down the snowy driveway, leaving me standing there with 2 smiling kids and a night I thought would be simple. The first couple of hours were fine. The kids, Ethan and Lily, were glued to a Disney movie, sprawled on the living room carpet with pillows and blankets. I scrolled TikTok, texted a couple friends, and honestly enjoyed the quiet. By 9, I sent them upstairs to brush teeth and tucked them into their rooms. The house was so big and old that every creak of the staircase echoed like a gunshot, but I'd grown used to it from previous babysitting nights. After a round of goodnights and making sure nightlights were on, I headed back downstairs. The storm outside had picked up, wind rattling the shutters, snow piling against the porch. I curled up on the couch with my phone, trying not to doze off. That's when the landline rang. I jumped, startled by the shrill sound. No one ever called their house phone when I was there. I picked it up hesitantly. Hello? For a second, there was only static. Then a man's voice came through, low and scratchy, almost like he was whispering directly into the receiver. "Don't go upstairs." I froze. My first thought was that it was some sick prank call, maybe a wrong number. I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding. A minute later, it rang again. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. This time, the voice was more urgent, harsher. I said, "Don't go upstairs. They're not alone up there." My stomach flipped. I slammed the phone down again, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself it had to be some creep calling random numbers, maybe even a friend messing with me. But then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. I hadn't given anyone the Parker's house number. Hell, I didn't even know it myself. Before I could process that, I heard footsteps from above. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing across the hallway upstairs. I told myself it was just the kids, maybe Ethan sneaking into Lily's room. I forced myself up the stairs, calling softly, "Ethan? Lily? You guys okay?" No answer. Just the steady creak of footsteps overhead. When I reached the top, the hallway was dim, only lit by the glow of the kids' nightlights spilling from their open doors. I peeked into Ethan's room. He was fast asleep, curled under his dinosaur blanket. Lily, too, snuggled with her stuffed rabbit, breathing softly. But the footsteps, they kept going. Down the hallway, past their rooms, toward the guest bedroom at the very end. I stood frozen, staring into the darkness at the far end of the hall. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Finally, I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice cracked in the silence. The footsteps stopped. Then, as if mocking me, the landline downstairs rang again. I bolted back down, nearly tripping over the steps. I snatched up the phone, my hand shaking. Before I could say anything, the voice hissed, "You didn't listen. He's in the house." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My heart was slamming against my ribs, my vision tunneling. I wanted to call Mr. Parker, call the cops, call anyone, but before I could grab my cell phone, I heard it. A door upstairs slowly creaking open. That was the breaking point. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and dialed 911 on my cell. The dispatcher answered, calm and professional, while I babbled about someone being in the house, about the kids sleeping upstairs. She told me to stay on the line, that officers were on their way, and to keep the kids safe. I crept back up the stairs, knife in one hand, phone pressed to my ear. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, shadows pooling in the corners. I checked the kids again. They were still sleeping peacefully. Too peacefully. Almost unnaturally still. I whispered their names, shook their shoulders, but neither stirred. Panic clawed at my throat. That's when I heard it, breathing. Not mine, not the kids'. Heavy, wet breathing coming from the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open just enough to see a sliver of darkness inside. The dispatcher kept asking me if I was safe, if I could barricade myself somewhere. I couldn't even answer. I was transfixed by that doorway, by the sound of someone in there, waiting. Summoning every ounce of courage, I pushed the door open with the knife extended. The room was empty. No intruder, no movement, just the faint smell of mildew and something else, something metallic. I backed out quickly, heart hammering. Then, from behind me, a voice whispered, "Too late." I spun around, knife slashing through the air, but the hallway was empty. The kids' rooms were empty too. The beds were still warm, but the children were gone. The police arrived minutes later, storming through the house, searching every room, every closet, every crawl space. But they didn't find anyone, not the kids, not an intruder, not even footprints in the fresh snow outside. It was like they had simply vanished into thin air. The Parkers never came back for their children. In fact, when the police tracked them down at the hospital, they were horrified. Mrs. Parker had never been admitted there. They hadn't called me. They hadn't even left the house that night. Because according to the neighbors, the Parkers and their children had died in a car accident 2 weeks before. And to this day, I still don't know who, or what, I was babysitting that night. I've lived most of my life brushing off strange things. Creaks in the floorboards, doors that won't stay shut, lights flickering without reason. I always blamed it on bad wiring, old wood, drafts, whatever explanation would let me sleep easier at night. But sometimes, no matter how badly you want to rationalize, reality won't let you. This is something I can't explain away, and every time I close my eyes, I still hear it. Back in 2019, I rented this old bungalow on the outskirts of Chicago. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a cramped little kitchen, but the rent was cheap, and after a bad breakup I just wanted a place that was mine, where I could lock the door and finally be alone. The house had character, sure, but it also had issues. The walls were thin, so thin I could hear the wind whistle through them at night, and the pipes clanged whenever someone ran water. I told myself it was part of the charm. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, set up my furniture, started settling into a routine. But around the second week, I began noticing something odd. At night, when I turned off the TV and let the silence settle in, I'd hear faint noises in the walls. At first, I thought it was mice or maybe raccoons in the crawl space. Scratching, shuffling, sometimes even a soft tapping. I told the landlord, and he sent out an exterminator, but they didn't find anything. No droppings, no nests, no signs of pests. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Because the noises kept getting louder. One night, lying in bed, I heard it clear as day, a voice. Muffled, like someone speaking through a pillow, but unmistakably a human voice. I sat up, heart hammering, straining to catch the words. It was low, garbled, almost like chanting. Then silence. I stayed awake the rest of the night, every muscle tense, listening. When morning came, I convinced myself it had been a dream. But it wasn't. Over the next week, the voice became a regular occurrence. Always at night, always when the house was quiet. Sometimes it was a whisper, sometimes it was a low murmur, but it was always coming from the walls. I recorded audio on my phone once, but when I played it back, all I heard was static. Friends told me it was probably my neighbors. I reminded them my nearest neighbor was half a mile away. One Saturday night, I finally snapped. I dragged a chair over, climbed up, and pressed my ear against the wall where the voice was loudest. My blood ran cold. It wasn't chanting this time. It was laughter. Deep, guttural laughter that made the plaster vibrate against my ear. I stumbled back, chair clattering to the floor, and didn't sleep at all that night. By the next day, I was exhausted, jumpy, desperate. I called my landlord again, demanded he come check it out himself. He agreed, but when he walked through the house, he acted like I was crazy. He knocked on the walls, listened for a few seconds, then shrugged. "Old house," he said. "These places make noise." But that night, the voice came back, louder than ever. I remember lying there, paralyzed, as it started whispering my name. Slowly, deliberately, Chris. My whole body went cold. I never told the landlord my name. I hadn't even put it on the mailbox yet. Whoever, whatever, it was, it knew me. I tried to fight back the panic. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox and started tearing into the drywall where the voice came from. Chunks of plaster rained down, filling the room with dust. I hacked and clawed until there was a hole big enough to stick my head through. Behind it? Nothing. Just wooden studs, insulation, darkness. I shone a flashlight inside, my hands trembling. No rats. No wires. No pipes. Nothing that could explain a human voice. That's when the whisper came again. Louder now, not muffled at all, but directly in my ear. Closer. I screamed and stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam swung wildly across the hole, and for a split second, I swear I saw an eye staring back at me. Not animal, not reflective, human. I moved out the next morning. Packed what I could fit in my car and never looked back. I didn't even care about losing the deposit. For weeks, I stayed at a friend's place, too shaken to be alone. I tried to convince myself it had been exhaustion, stress, maybe even a hallucination. But then something happened that erased all doubt. About a month later, I got a call from my old landlord. His voice was shaky, nothing like the dismissive man I remembered. He said the new tenants had been complaining of noises in the walls too. He went to investigate himself this time. When they tore out part of the drywall in the master bedroom, they found a hidden crawlspace that didn't show up on the blueprints. Inside was a small mattress, empty food wrappers, and a notebook filled with page after page of names, none of which he recognized. Except one. Mine. Written over and over again. He hung up after that. I never heard from him again. And I don't want to know what happened to the people who moved in after me. Because some nights, even now, I wake up in my new apartment with that same voice whispering from the walls. And it still knows my name. I grew up in Minnesota, in a town where locking your doors was more of a suggestion than a rule. It was the kind of place where people left their car keys on the dash, kids roamed until the streetlights came on, and everyone trusted that the worst thing that could happen was a raccoon tipping over the trash cans. I lived in that bubble of security most of my life. But when I moved out on my own, renting a little ground-floor apartment just outside the city, I learned quickly that the world wasn't as safe as I'd been raised to believe. And the lesson came one night when I was home alone. The apartment was nothing special, cheap carpet, thin walls, a kitchen the size of a closet. But it had these huge windows that stretched almost from floor to ceiling, giving me a nice view of the street. I used to love sitting by them, especially on rainy nights, watching cars glide by, their headlights cutting through the mist. But the windows were also the one thing I didn't like about the place. They were so big, so easy to see through, and the blinds never seemed to close all the way. It always felt like someone could just stand outside and watch me, and I'd never know. That fear became real on a late November night. I had just finished dinner, the TV humming in the background, when I noticed movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, maybe someone walking their dog. But when I looked closer, I saw him. A man, standing perfectly still just beyond the glow of the street lamp, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving, wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, he was just staring. My stomach dropped. I pulled the blinds shut immediately and locked the window, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe he was waiting for an Uber, maybe he was lost. Still, my hands shook as I tried to distract myself with the TV. An hour later, curiosity got the better of me. I peeked through the blinds. He was still there. Closer this time. Standing right at the edge of the grass, no more than 20 feet from my window. His face was hard to make out in the dark, but I could see the outline of a hood pulled up over his head. He wasn't looking at the street, or the other apartments, he was looking directly at me. I slammed the blinds shut again, heart hammering. I called a friend, trying to sound casual as we chatted, but my voice kept cracking. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the window, half expecting to see the blinds ripple. Finally, around midnight, I told myself I was being paranoid and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, ears straining for any sound. At some point, maybe around 2 a.m., I drifted off, only to wake with a start. A faint tapping sound. I sat up, holding my breath. There it was again. Tap. 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 It was coming from the window. I froze, too terrified to move. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate. Finally, I forced myself out of bed and crept to the living room. The blinds were swaying ever so slightly, like someone had brushed against them. I grabbed a heavy flashlight, yanked the blinds open, and shone the beam outside. Nothing. The yard was empty, the street quiet. I told myself the wind must have blown a branch against the glass. But then I noticed something that made my skin crawl, smudges. Greasy, smeared handprints on the outside of the glass, right at face level. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, the handprints were still there, clear as day. I considered calling the police, but what could I say? That someone touched my window? Without proof of a crime, I knew they'd dismiss it. So I scrubbed the glass clean and tried to move on. But the man kept coming back. Every few nights, I'd catch sight of him outside. Always standing just far enough to be out of detail, always staring. Once, I saw him crouched low, like he was trying to blend into the bushes. Another time, I woke to find the blinds drawn back just a few inches, even though I swore I'd closed them tight before bed. The final straw came one Thursday night. I was dozing on the couch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. 4 words, nice pajamas. Blue ones. My blood ran cold. I was wearing blue plaid pajamas. My curtains were shut. My phone shook in my hand as another message came through, smile for me. I dialed 911 immediately, barely able to get the words out. The operator told me to stay on the line, that officers were being dispatched. I was pacing the living room, every nerve on fire, when I heard it, a soft creak. From inside the apartment. I turned slowly toward the hallway. The closet door was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. My heart nearly stopped as the door creaked wider, inch by inch, and a hand slid out. Pale, thin, trembling fingers wrapping around the edge of the doorframe. I screamed, dropped the phone, and bolted out the front door barefoot into the freezing night. The police arrived minutes later. They stormed the apartment, searched every corner, every closet, every crawl space. At first, they said no one was there. But then one of the officers noticed something, tiny holes drilled into the wall behind my bedroom dresser. When they pulled it away, they found a narrow opening that led to a hidden crawl space running the length of the apartment. Inside, they found blankets, food wrappers, and a cell phone. The same one that had texted me. The same one that had dozens of photos of me sleeping, eating, watching TV, every moment of my life in that apartment. And the man? They never caught him. He slipped away before the police got there, leaving only his nest behind. To this day, I don't know how long he'd been living in my walls. I don't know if he followed me when I moved, or if he's still out there, standing in someone else's yard, staring in through their windows. But sometimes, when I wake up at night, I swear I hear tapping on the glass again. And I'm too afraid to look. I've never been the kind of person to believe in the supernatural. Ghost stories, urban legends, creepy Reddit threads, I ate them up for entertainment but never once thought any of it could bleed into my life. That changed 3 years ago, on a night I spent home alone in the apartment I'd just moved into. It wasn't a haunted house or a crumbling Victorian mansion, it was a modern one-bedroom unit in a mid-rise complex in Denver. Sleek appliances, white walls, big bathroom mirror, everything new. Which is why what happened that night doesn't make sense. If it had been some old, creaky house, maybe I could have blamed it on bad wiring, faulty plumbing, shadows from street lamps. But this, there was no explanation. It was a Friday evening, late September. The kind of night where the city hums with life, but my building was unusually quiet. Most of the tenants were young professionals who spent their weekends out drinking or visiting friends, so it wasn't unusual for the halls to feel empty. I'd stocked up on snacks, queued up some Netflix, and settled in for what I thought would be a relaxing night. The first weird thing I noticed happened around 11 p.m. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom, foam filling my mouth, when I caught something strange in the mirror. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just my tired eyes playing with shadows. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. My reflection wasn't brushing its teeth in sync with me. My arm moved up, toothbrush in hand, but in the mirror, it lagged a second behind, like a glitch in a video game. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, watching. My reflection blinked slower than I did, like it wasn't trying to keep up anymore. My chest tightened. I laughed nervously, shook my head, and told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was just exhausted, zoning out too hard. I finished brushing, turned off the light, and tried to forget about it. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the quiet too heavy, the shadows in my bedroom stretching too long. Around 2 a.m., I gave up, deciding to get some water. I shuffled to the bathroom, half asleep, and flipped on the light. That's when I realized it wasn't my imagination. The reflection in the mirror wasn't me. Not exactly. It looked like me, yes, but the expression was wrong. Where my face was tired, groggy, and slack, the reflection's face was alert, eyes wide and unblinking. Its lips curled into the faintest smirk, one I knew for a fact I wasn't making. My stomach dropped. I reached out and touched the edge of the sink. The reflection copied me, but a beat too late. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door hard, heart pounding. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself mirrors could distort things, that maybe I was experiencing sleep paralysis while standing, some kind of waking dream. But I couldn't bring myself to look in that mirror again. I sat on the couch the rest of the night, all the lights on, staring at the bathroom door like something was waiting behind it. The next morning, everything looked normal. I even dared myself to look in the mirror again. My reflection was perfectly in sync, no smirk, no delay, no difference. Relief washed over me, and I almost convinced myself the whole thing was a hallucination. Almost. Because over the next week, small things started happening. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection smiling when I wasn't. Sometimes it would tilt its head the opposite way from mine. Once, I saw its lips moving as if whispering words, though no sound came out. I stopped using that bathroom unless I absolutely had to. I shaved in the kitchen using a handheld mirror. I brushed my teeth without looking up. One night, around midnight, I woke up to a faint sound. It took me a moment to place it, tapping. Soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the bathroom. My chest tightened as I forced myself out of bed, creeping down the short hall. The tapping grew louder, sharper, like fingernails on glass. I stood outside the bathroom door, every nerve screaming at me not to open it. But I had to. When I flicked on the light, the tapping stopped. My reflection stood there, staring at me with a grin so wide it didn't look human. And then, God help me, it raised its hand and knocked against the inside of the mirror. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall, unable to breathe. The reflection leaned closer, pressing its palm flat against the glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear. My own hand was trembling at my side, not moving, but in the mirror, it was lifting, reaching back. I ran out of the apartment that night. Slept in my car in the parking lot until the sun came up. The next day, I called maintenance and demanded they replace the mirror. They thought I was nuts but eventually agreed, swapping it out with a new one. For a while, that seemed to solve the problem. No smirking reflections, no lag, no tapping. I started to feel sane again. Until a few weeks later. I was on a video call with a friend, laptop propped up on my kitchen table. We were laughing about something dumb when she suddenly stopped, her face going pale. I asked what was wrong. She said, "There's someone behind you." I whipped around, nothing. Just my kitchen, my empty hallway. I laughed it off nervously, but she wasn't laughing. "No, I'm serious," she said. "I swear I just saw someone. They were standing in the hallway. They looked just like you." The blood drained from my face. I ended the call quickly, telling her it was probably bad connection, a glitch. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That night, as I was locking up before bed, I passed by the blank spot on the wall where the bathroom mirror used to be. And for just a moment, I swear I saw a faint reflection staring back at me from the bare plaster. Smiling. Waiting. And now, I can't shake the thought, what if the mirror wasn't showing me my reflection at all? What if it was showing me something else, something that's still here, just waiting for the right moment to come through? When I was 18, I thought moving out of my parents' house would mean freedom. I pictured late nights, no curfews, blasting music as loud as I wanted, eating pizza at 3 a.m., all the things my strict household never allowed. And for the first month, that's exactly what it felt like. I had rented a small, older house just outside Portland with money from my part-time job. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, creaky wood floors, but it was mine. I didn't notice the attic at first. The entrance was one of those square panels in the hallway ceiling, the kind you push up with a stick and climb into. No ladder, no markings, nothing that drew attention. It was only when my cousin visited and pointed it out that I even remembered it existed. "Creepy," she said, staring at it. "Do you even know what's up there?" I shrugged, pretending it didn't bother me. Probably insulation and rat poop. But later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop glancing at the ceiling, imagining what might be hiding above me. Still, I forced myself to sleep. The first strange sound came a week later. It was a quiet scratching, faint but distinct, coming from directly above my bedroom. I told myself it was raccoons or mice, it's an old house, after all. But the scratching didn't move around like an animal. It was slow, deliberate, like something dragging across the wooden boards. And it always started around 2 a.m., right when I was on the edge of sleep. I bought traps, sealed holes, even hired pest control, but they found nothing. "Clean attic," the guy told me, shining his flashlight around. "No droppings, no nests. You're good." But I didn't feel good. The noises continued, sometimes accompanied by faint thuds, as if someone was shifting their weight above me. One night, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing directly above my bed. My whole body froze. Every hair on my arm stood up. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe even a dream bleeding into reality. But deep down, I knew better. One night, determined to prove myself wrong, I set up my phone on the dresser and recorded as I slept. In the morning, I replayed the video, eyes half shut with dread. 4 hours, nothing. Then, at 2:17 a.m., I heard it, footsteps, faint but clear, moving slowly across the ceiling. The camera shook slightly, as if something heavy shifted above. I sat frozen, watching the timestamp creep forward, until suddenly, a loud bang, directly over the phone. The screen went black. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called my landlord and demanded answers. He sounded uncomfortable, like he wanted to hang up. Finally, he said, "Look, it's an old house. The attic is sealed, okay? Nobody's been up there in years. Don't go opening it. Don't go opening it." That phrase stuck in my head all day, gnawing at me. What was he hiding? Why was he so quick to dismiss it? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The scratching started again, louder this time, almost insistent. My chest tightened. My breath came in shallow bursts. I knew I had 2 choices, keep pretending, or confront whatever was up there. So I grabbed a chair from the kitchen, climbed up, and pushed the attic panel with a broom handle. It creaked open slowly, releasing a wave of stale, cold air that smelled like rot. My heart hammered. With a flashlight in one hand, I pulled myself up into the darkness. The attic was cramped, filled with dust and cobwebs. The beam of light cut through the gloom, illuminating wooden beams and insulation. At first, it looked empty. I almost laughed with relief. And then I saw it. In the far corner, half hidden under a moth-eaten blanket, was a sleeping bag. Next to it sat empty cans of food, water bottles, and a small pile of clothing. My stomach dropped. Someone had been living up here. Before I could process it, the flashlight flickered, and I heard a breath. Not mine. A low, shaky inhale, coming from the darkness behind me. I spun around, light darting across the space, and for a split second, I saw eyes. Wide, glassy eyes staring at me from the shadows. Then the light died. I don't remember climbing down. I don't remember running. The next thing I knew, I was outside on the street, barefoot, phone in my hand, screaming at 911. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the attic but found nothing. No sleeping bag, no cans, no clothes. Not even dust disturbed. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, muttering about stress and hallucinations. But I know what I saw. I moved out a week later, breaking my lease and leaving half my stuff behind. My landlord didn't argue. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. The worst part? A month after I left, I was scrolling through local news when a headline caught my eye: tenant found dead in home, attic discovered to contain hidden room. It was my old address. The article said police found a concealed section in the attic, accessible only from inside. Inside, they found signs of recent habitation, and something else they refused to describe. I never read past that. Because sometimes, late at night, I swear I still hear it. That slow, deliberate scratching, right above my bed. When I was 19, I moved into a ground-floor apartment in a quiet part of Ohio. It wasn't fancy, just a cheap rental near campus, but it had one thing I loved: big windows. The living room had two wide ones that looked out onto a grassy courtyard, and my bedroom had a tall, narrow window right by the bed. During the day, sunlight poured in. At night, the street lamps outside gave off a warm orange glow. It made the place feel open, airy, safe. But that sense of safety didn't last long. I had only been there a few weeks when I first noticed something strange. One night, around 1 a.m., I woke up thirsty. As I rolled over, I glanced at the window, and froze. A face was pressed against the glass. Pale skin, wide eyes, and lips stretched into a grin that didn't look human. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked hard, and just like that, the face was gone. I told myself it was a dream. Stress. My imagination playing tricks. But from that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. Watching. It started subtly. I'd come home from class and find the blinds tilted differently than I'd left them. Sometimes I'd swear I saw movement in the reflection of the glass when no one was outside. My friends laughed when I told them, saying ground floor apartments always felt creepy, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just nerves. One night, I stayed up late studying in the living room. Around 2 a.m., I caught movement outside the big window. My heart jumped. Slowly, I turned my head. For just a moment, I saw a silhouette standing in the courtyard, completely still. A man. I rushed to the window, but by the time I pulled the curtain back, he was gone. From then on, the visits grew bolder. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of faint tapping on the glass. Other times, I'd feel a presence so heavy I couldn't breathe, only to find nothing when I forced myself to look. I even bought heavier curtains to block out the view entirely, but somehow, that made it worse. Because now I couldn't see if someone was out there, I could only imagine it. One night, I finally snapped. I'd just woken up, heart racing, from the sound of fingernails scraping down the length of my bedroom window. I tore open the curtain, ready to scream, and there he was. The same pale face, pressed against the glass, grinning at me. His eyes were wide, too wide, as though he didn't blink. His breath fogged the window. My scream caught in my throat as I stumbled back. And then, just like before, he vanished. I called the police the next morning, but they found no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. Probably just a nightmare, one officer said, though his eyes lingered on the window a little too long. Weeks went by. I barely slept. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind outside set me on edge. I considered breaking the lease, but money was tight, and besides, how do you explain to a landlord that you're leaving because of a face in the window? Then came the night everything changed. It was late November, bitter cold outside. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to my chin. Sometime after 3 a.m., a sound woke me. Not tapping, not scraping, this was different. It was the sound of glass cracking. I shot upright, every muscle tense. My eyes darted to the living room window, and my blood froze. A spiderweb crack spread across the glass, growing wider with each faint creak. And behind it, silhouetted in the orange streetlight, was the man. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He was pushing. I scrambled to the door, fumbling with the lock, heart hammering in my throat. Just as I flung it open, I heard the window shatter behind me. I ran into the courtyard barefoot, screaming for help. Lights flicked on in neighboring apartments. A man in pajamas rushed out, asking what happened. When we went back inside, the window was intact. No crack, no shattered glass, nothing. Just the same perfect pane of glass, reflecting my pale, terrified face. I moved out 2 days later, breaking the lease without explanation. I thought I'd escaped. But last month, nearly 3 years later, I was back in Ohio visiting family. I stayed at a friend's place, another ground floor apartment. The first night there, I woke up thirsty around 1 a.m. I rolled over, glanced at the window, and my blood ran cold. A pale face. Pressed against the glass. Grinning. And that's when I realized something I'd never considered before. Maybe he wasn't tied to the apartment. Maybe he was tied to me. I've never told anyone this story before, mostly because I don't want to sound insane. But every time I close my eyes at night, I relive it. The sounds, the smells, the impossible things I saw, they've burned themselves into me. And even now, years later, I still don't know if I survived something supernatural, or if something else entirely was happening inside that house. It was the summer after my sophomore year of college. I'd gotten a job house sitting for a family who lived just outside of Pittsburgh. They were going on a month-long trip to Europe and needed someone to water plants, collect mail, feed their dog, and keep the place from looking empty. For $500 a week, I couldn't say no. The house was massive, 3 stories, old brick, with heavy wooden floors that creaked under every step. It wasn't one of those modern, polished houses. This place felt like history was embedded in the walls. The couple gave me a quick tour before they left, showing me where everything was, but when we reached the 3rd floor, they skipped one of the rooms. The husband noticed me looking at the closed door. "Don't worry about that one," he said quickly. "It stays locked. Storage only." I nodded, not thinking much of it. Every old house has a weird locked room, right? The first week passed quietly. I took care of the dog, watched TV, lounged in their oversized living room, enjoyed having so much space to myself. But by the 2nd week, I started hearing noises. At first, they were faint, soft thuds, like something heavy dropping upstairs. I assumed the old house was settling. But one night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it again, a sharp knock. 3 times. Coming from the 3rd floor. The dog reacted too, ears perked, growling low in its throat. That's when I knew it wasn't just the house. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe some pipes were making noise. But every night after that, the sounds continued, sometimes footsteps, sometimes scratching. Always from the 3rd floor. Always near the locked room. By the 3rd week, the noises grew bolder. One night, I woke up to the sound of something dragging across the floor above my room. The dog whined, refusing to leave the bed. My heart pounded as I stared at the ceiling, every nerve screaming at me not to go up there. The next day, I searched the house top to bottom, looking for a spare key. I checked drawers, cabinets, even behind picture frames. Nothing. But the more I tried to ignore that locked door, the more it consumed me. Finally, one night, I snapped. Armed with a hammer and screwdriver, I climbed to the 3rd floor and stood in front of the door. The wood looked older than the rest of the house, darker, scarred with deep grooves. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. I told myself I was being dramatic. That I'd open it, find dusty furniture or Christmas decorations, and laugh at my own paranoia. I wedged the screwdriver into the frame and pried. The lock gave way with a metallic crack, and the door creaked open. The smell hit me first. Damp, sour, like rot. I gagged, covering my nose as I shined my flashlight inside. The room was empty. Almost. Just 4 bare walls, no furniture, no boxes. But the floorboards were scratched, gouged deep, like someone had clawed at them from the inside. And in the center of the room, etched into the wood, was a circle of strange symbols I didn't recognize. I felt sick. My whole body screamed to get out, but my legs refused to move. And then, I heard it. A whisper. It came from the corner of the room, low and raspy. My light darted toward it, but nothing was there. The whisper came again, this time louder, almost words. My skin crawled. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking, heart clawing its way out of my chest. I grabbed the handle and yanked, but it wouldn't budge. Something heavy pressed from the other side. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices now, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. My flashlight flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. And then, I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them, smeared across the walls, appearing one by one in the beam of my light. Some were small, childlike. Others were long, thin, impossibly large. They pressed against the walls, the floor, the ceiling, as if reaching for me. I screamed, slamming my shoulder against the door until finally it burst open. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping, slamming the door shut behind me. My legs barely carried me as I bolted down the stairs. The dog barked wildly, circling me as if trying to herd me away from the staircase. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, gripping the dog like a life raft. The next morning, I went back upstairs. The door was closed. When I pulled it open, my stomach dropped. The room was empty. No symbols, no handprints, no smell of rot. Just bare wooden floors, clean and untouched. I packed my bags and left that afternoon, leaving the keys on the counter. When the couple called me later, thanking me for house sitting, I didn't mention the room. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I hear it again. That faint whisper. Just 3 words, clear as day. You let us out. I don't know if I believe in fate, but sometimes I wonder if certain events are just waiting for you to stumble into them. My story begins in the summer after college, when I rented a small, 2-story house in rural Ohio. The house was old, built sometime in the 1940s, with peeling paint on the outside and warped hardwood floors inside. But the rent was cheap, the neighbors were quiet, and I liked the isolation. I had grown up in a busy city, so this was a welcome change. From the first day, I noticed the basement. It wasn't that unusual to have one in an old house, but the door was different. Heavy, made of thick oak, with a rusty latch that refused to turn smoothly. When I opened it, a wave of cold air rolled out, carrying the smell of damp soil and mold. The basement itself was unfinished, stone walls, a dirt floor, and stacks of old boxes that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. My landlord had told me it was mostly storage and that I could use it if I needed, but he avoided my eyes when he mentioned it. The first strange thing happened 2 nights after I moved in. I had been home alone, watching TV in the living room. Around midnight, I heard a creak from below, the basement. At first, I ignored it. Old houses make noises. But then I heard it again. Slow footsteps, moving across the stone floor. The sound of someone, or something, dragging something heavy. I froze. The dog I had adopted a few months prior, a small terrier named Max, whined nervously at my feet. I told myself it was just the house settling. I checked the basement the next morning, nothing. Empty. No boxes disturbed, no dust shifted. I laughed it off, though my stomach remained uneasy. Over the next week, the sounds grew more frequent. Footsteps at night. Dragging. Sometimes, muffled whispers. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that living alone made you paranoid. But one night, around 2 a.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of the latch on the basement door click. I didn't move at first. My heart pounded in my chest. Then I heard it, the door creaked open, slow and deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the stairs. The basement was pitch black, the beam of the flashlight barely illuminating the first few steps. Max growled low, his hackles raised. I called out. Hello? Anyone there? No answer. Just silence. I finally mustered the courage to descend the stairs. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness. Everything seemed normal, the boxes stacked neatly, the stone walls unchanged. And yet, the air felt heavier. My chest tightened. My skin prickled. Something about the basement felt wrong. Then I saw it. A handprint, smeared in dirt, on one of the walls. Not small, large, human-sized, pressing as if someone had been trapped behind the stone. My stomach dropped. I spun the flashlight across the basement. Nothing. No one. But the handprint remained, freshly made, the dirt still loose. I ran upstairs, slammed the basement door, and locked it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, Max pressed against my chest, growling at every creak of the house. The next day, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had broken in and left the print. But there were no signs of forced entry. The windows were all locked. My landlord assured me the previous tenant hadn't complained of anything strange. I didn't go near the basement for a week. But then, on a Friday night, I was doing laundry in the basement, lights on, door open, Max by my side, when I heard it. The scraping sound. Like nails against the dirt floor. I froze, shining the flashlight around. The room was empty. And then I heard a whisper. Up here. I whipped around, heart in my throat. Nothing. Just the boxes, the stone walls, and the dirt floor. Max growled and ran to the stairs, barking frantically. I ran after him, not stopping until I slammed the door and locked it tight. Over the next few nights, the basement door moved on its own. I'd hear the latch click, the door creak, sometimes footsteps pacing below. I slept in the living room with all the lights on, afraid to go near the stairs. Finally, I decided to confront it. I took a crowbar, flashlight in hand, and descended the basement steps one evening, determined to find out what was happening. The air was colder than usual. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows across the stone walls. I swept the beam across the basement, and that's when I saw the small hole in the corner, barely noticeable, almost hidden behind a stack of boxes. Curiosity overrode fear. I knelt down and shined the flashlight inside. My stomach dropped. Inside the hole was a tiny crawl space. It smelled of rotten earth. And in the dim light, I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me. Wide, unblinking, human. I stumbled back, screaming. The eyes disappeared. I ran up the stairs, bolted the door, and never returned to that basement while I lived there. Weeks later, I told my landlord about the incident. He didn't flinch. He just said, the previous tenant, they disappeared. Nobody knows why. I moved out immediately. I never found out what, or who, had been living in that basement, but some nights, I still dream about those eyes. And sometimes, in quiet moments, I swear I can hear footsteps dragging across a dirt floor just below me, whispering my name. I don't know why I agreed to babysit that night. I guess it was desperation. I needed money, and my friend offered me $50 to watch her apartment while she went out. It seemed simple enough, one bedroom, small living room, her 2 cats, and a bathroom. Nothing unusual. But the apartment had a closet in the corner of the bedroom that always made me uneasy. My friend had laughed when I mentioned it, saying, "Don't worry, it's just storage. The previous tenant left some old stuff in there, that's all." I didn't think much of it at first. I settled in around 8 p.m., fed the cats, and started watching TV. It was a quiet night, the kind where the city hums faintly in the background, and the apartment feels like a cocoon. But around 11:30, I noticed a noise. A soft, almost imperceptible scratching, coming from the corner of the bedroom. I froze, heart hammering. The sound was coming from the closet. At first, I told myself it was the cats. Maybe they had jumped inside. But when I peeked toward the closet, both cats were sitting calmly on the bed, staring at me like I was crazy. The scratching continued, slow, deliberate, like fingernails on wood. I tried to ignore it, telling myself the apartment was old, maybe the closet door was rubbing against the frame. But then I heard it, a whisper. Soft, low, almost a hiss. I couldn't make out words, just the tone. My stomach churned. I stood up, gripping the edge of the bed. "Hello?" I called, voice shaking. Nothing. Just silence. Then, the closet door creaked open, slowly. I froze. My mind raced. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe a draft had caused the old door to swing. But something about the movement was deliberate. The door stopped ajar, and I swore I saw a shadow inside, though it vanished the moment I blinked. I called my friend, trying to sound calm. "Hey, the closet, does it ever do that?" She laughed. "Do what?" I described the scratching and the door movement. She sounded confused. "Seriously? That closet has always been locked. You didn't open it, did you?" I hadn't. I hadn't touched it. I hung up, heart racing. The scratching started again, louder this time, closer to the edge of the door. I grabbed a flashlight, hands trembling, and pointed it at the gap. And that's when I saw it. A hand. Pale, thin, pressing against the inside of the doorframe. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The hand withdrew, and the scratching stopped. Silence. I ran to the living room, keeping the lights on, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Around 1 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom. The scratching started again. I gritted my teeth and decided to confront it. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly approached the closet. The door creaked as I leaned closer, heart pounding. Then the whisper came again. Clearer this time. "Come in." My breath caught. I shook my head, stepping back. The closet door swung open on its own. Inside, darkness. But in that darkness, I thought I saw a figure crouched in the corner, watching me. I screamed, backing away. The closet slammed shut on its own. I ran to the door of the apartment, keys in hand, and left without looking back. The next morning, my friend called. "Hey, sorry about last night. I forgot to tell you," she paused. "The previous tenant disappeared. They lived here alone and just vanished. No one knows why. The closet was always locked, never touched. The police never found anything. I didn't go back after that. I don't know what lives in that apartment, in that closet. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I swear I hear scratching, whispering my name. And I know, somehow, it's still waiting." I had just moved into my first apartment in Chicago. It was a small, one-bedroom unit on the third floor of a building from the 1960s. The kind of place with creaky floors, outdated plumbing, and neighbors you never see but always hear. I liked it. Quiet, isolated, and cheap. Perfect for a college student trying to save money. Everything was normal for the first week. I unpacked, arranged my things, and tried to settle in. But then I started hearing noises. Not the usual city hum, but footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. The first time it happened, I thought it was a neighbor coming home late. But then I realized something strange. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. They never continued down the hall. Just stopped. And every time, they stopped at the same spot. I started locking my door more carefully, checking the peephole, trying to catch whoever it was. But I never saw anyone. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of my front door handle rattling. Someone was trying to open it. I froze, heart hammering. I called 911, whispered to the dispatcher, but before they could get here, the handle stopped moving. Silence. The next day, I asked the building manager if anyone had reported a break-in. He shook his head. Nothing. Building's quiet. You're probably just stressed. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. Over the next few nights, the noises got worse. I would hear breathing in the hallway. Once, a soft knock on my bedroom window. Another time, a shadow passing my door even though I was home alone. One evening, desperate, I decided to confront it. I stepped into the hallway, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. I called out, "Hey! Who's there?" Silence. Then I heard it, footsteps moving backward. Slowly, deliberately, keeping pace with me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. That's when I realized something terrifying. The footsteps were matching mine. But I was alone. I ran back into my apartment and locked the door. Every night after that, I would hear someone pacing outside, always stopping exactly where my peephole was. Then came the final night. I had been home alone, trying to study, when I heard the footsteps again. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. I peeked through the peephole. What I saw made my blood run cold. A man. Standing in the hallway. But not just any man, he looked exactly like me. Same height, same hair, even the same clothes I had worn that day. He was staring directly at my door. I dropped the phone, stumbled back, and the door rattled violently. I could hear him breathing through the wood. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it. Suddenly, the door clicked open on its own. The man stepped inside. I screamed. He tilted his head, smiling eerily. "You shouldn't have moved here," he whispered. I bolted for the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and ran toward the fire escape. The man didn't follow. When I looked back, he had vanished. I called the police immediately. They searched the building thoroughly. No signs of forced entry, no neighbor fitting the description, nothing. I moved out the next morning. I couldn't stay. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I hear footsteps behind me, matching mine, pacing in perfect sync. And I know, somewhere, he's still out there, waiting for me. I never believed in being truly alone until that summer. I was home alone in my parents' house in suburban Michigan. They had gone on vacation for 2 weeks, leaving me with the responsibility of looking after the place. I was 19, excited about the freedom, and spent the first few days enjoying the quiet, blasting music, ordering pizza, and binge-watching shows. Everything was normal until the first phone call came. It was around midnight. My phone rang, a sound that seemed to echo through the empty house. I picked it up, expecting a friend. The line was silent. I said, "Hello?" Nothing. I hung up, thinking it was a prank call. It didn't happen again until the next night. Midnight again. The same number, the same silence. My stomach sank. By the third night, I was anxious before the clock even struck 12. I debated disconnecting the phone, but it was landline only. My parents refused to give me their mobile for the time being. On the fourth night, I decided to answer the call as soon as it rang. Midnight struck. The phone rang once. Twice. I snatched it up. A voice. Whispering. Almost too faint to hear. But it was there. Cold, raspy. The words were barely intelligible. Something like, "I'm inside." I froze. My heart thumped in my chest. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was a prank, someone trying to scare me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I checked every door, every window. Locked. Curtains drawn. The house empty except for me. The calls continued every night after that, always at midnight, always from the same number, always with that same whisper, "I'm inside." By the sixth night, I was on edge. I started leaving lights on, setting up my laptop in the living room instead of my bedroom. Around 11:55 p.m., I watched the clock tick closer to midnight. I felt my palms sweat, every noise amplified. The phone rang. I answered immediately. This time, the whisper was clearer. I'm in the kitchen. I bolted up, heart racing, flashlight in hand. The kitchen was empty. No signs of anyone. I checked every corner. I even went outside to the yard. Nothing. By the 7th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my friend and asked if I could stay with him for a few nights. He agreed. I spent the next 2 nights at his place, sleeping soundly for the first time. I thought maybe it was over. But the night I returned home, everything changed. I entered the house, feeling relieved to be back in my familiar surroundings. The lights flickered slightly, nothing unusual. I went to bed around 11 p.m., determined to ignore the clock. Midnight struck. My phone rang. I froze. I wanted to ignore it, to run, anything. But curiosity, or stupidity, made me pick it up. The voice came again. But this time, it was inside my house. Not from the phone. Behind me. I spun around. The kitchen doorway was empty. But the whisper came closer. Right behind you. I bolted out of the house, screaming, running into the street barefoot. The neighbors turned on their lights. I could hear footsteps following me. I didn't look back. Police came the next day. No signs of forced entry. No intruder. Nothing. My parents returned a few days later. I tried to tell them what happened. They nodded politely, not understanding. I moved out shortly after that. But even now, when I hear a phone ring at night, I hesitate. My blood runs cold. And I still remember that whisper, chilling me to the bone. I'm inside. I've lived alone since I was 20, renting a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Cleveland. It was nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom unit with a narrow hallway, a small living room, and a kitchen, but it was mine. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed it, I didn't think much of it. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and I was getting ready for bed. I glanced down the hallway and thought I saw a shadow move. My brain immediately dismissed it. The light from the street lamp outside was angled strangely, casting shadows that shifted with the blinds. I laughed at myself, thinking I was just tired. But then it happened again the next night. And the night after that. A shadow, creeping along the hallway, never fully forming, never showing any clear shape. I started keeping the lights on, telling myself that if it was just a trick of the eyes, the extra illumination would help. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of faint footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. I froze, heart hammering. My bedroom door was closed, but the sound of steps moved closer. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering, barely able to form words. The operator assured me someone would come, but I was alone with the footsteps that now seemed to stop just outside my bedroom door. I didn't move until I heard a soft whisper, "Why are you hiding?" I bolted from my bed, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. The hallway was empty. The shadow was gone. My walls were solid, my doors locked. But the feeling lingered. Someone, or something, had been there. The next day, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a neighbor was walking past the window. Maybe it was sleep deprivation. I even asked a friend to come over and stay the night, just to prove I was not imagining it. That night, the footsteps came again. The shadow appeared again. This time, I wasn't alone, but it didn't matter. The shadow moved faster, darting back and forth along the hallway, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. My friend screamed when it passed near him, though he claimed he didn't see anything when the lights were on. I realized then that the shadow wasn't confined to the hallway. It could appear anywhere I left the lights off, lurking just beyond my vision. Weeks passed. I barely slept. I installed cameras, motion detectors, even recording devices. Nothing captured the shadow, nothing showed movement. But I could feel it. Always. Watching. Waiting. Then, one night, I made a mistake. I left my bedroom door ajar. Around 1 a.m., I awoke to the sound of slow, heavy breathing. I glanced toward the hallway and froze. The shadow was there, full, darker than darkness itself, forming a vague humanoid shape that leaned toward me. It whispered again, finally awake. I screamed, bolted for the door, and ran to my car, leaving the apartment unlocked. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the car, heart hammering. The next morning, I returned with the intention of moving out immediately. But when I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Clean. The shadow was gone. Nothing had moved. Everything seemed normal. I left that apartment later that day, leaving most of my things behind. But sometimes, even now, when I close my eyes at night, I see it again. Standing in the corner of a hallway. Watching. Waiting. And I know, deep down, that wherever I go, it will follow. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Indiana, the kind of place where doors are rarely locked and kids play outside until dusk. When I was 20, I moved into my first house, a small 2-story with a fenced backyard. It was perfect, or so I thought. The first time I noticed anything strange was a week after moving in. I was outside watering plants when I glanced at the fence and thought I saw someone standing just beyond it. My heart jumped, but when I rubbed my eyes, the figure was gone. I chalked it up to my imagination. The next evening, I was sitting in the living room, watching TV, when I noticed shadows moving across the backyard. I looked through the window. No one. But then I saw a hand, pale and still, press against the fence. I gasped and dropped the glass I was holding. The sound must have startled whoever, or whatever, it was, because the hand disappeared. I told myself it was a prank, maybe a neighborhood kid testing the fence. But the next few nights, the figure kept appearing. Always at night, always watching from just beyond the backyard fence. I tried shining my flashlight, calling out, but no response. Only silence. One night, I decided to confront it. I grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously stepped outside, shining the light around. The backyard was empty, no footprints, no movement, nothing. I even climbed onto the fence to get a better look. Nothing. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then, as I turned to go back inside, I saw it. Standing at the edge of the property, silhouetted by the dim street light, was a man. Tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. My heart stopped. I swung the bat at him, shouting. He vanished. Not ran, not ducked behind something, vanished. I slammed the door, locked it, and sat trembling. The next day, I asked my neighbors if anyone had seen a stranger lurking at night. They shook their heads. You must have imagined it, one said. But I knew I hadn't. Over the next week, the appearances escalated. Sometimes I would hear the gate creak open. Sometimes footsteps in the grass. Occasionally, the faintest sound of breathing. Always at night. Always watching. One night, desperate and terrified, I decided to stay up and wait. I turned off all the lights and sat in the living room, flashlight off, listening. Around midnight, I heard it, the gate creaking open, slow and deliberate. My hands shook as I pointed my flashlight toward the backyard. He was there. Closer than before. I could see his pale face, almost too white against the darkness, eyes wide, staring straight at me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. My fingers fumbled at the handle, heart racing, and then I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around. No one. But I knew he had been there. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and ran out the front door. The police arrived minutes later. They searched the backyard and neighborhood. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone being there. I moved out a few days later, leaving the house behind. But sometimes, when I drive past that neighborhood, I swear I see him, standing just beyond the fence, watching. Waiting. And I know, somehow, he's still out there. I was living alone for the first time in my small apartment in Detroit. It wasn't anything fancy, one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room barely big enough for my couch and TV, but it was mine. I had just turned 21, and the idea of being completely independent thrilled me. The first time it happened, I was lying on the couch, scrolling on my phone, around 11:30 p.m. There was a sharp knock at the door. One knock. I froze, staring at it. Normally, I'd answer immediately if I was expecting someone, but this was the middle of the night. No one was supposed to be here. I got up slowly, peeking through the peephole. The hallway was empty. My heart was racing. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe the maintenance guy, but no, this apartment building was mostly empty at night. I shrugged it off and went back to bed. The next night, it happened again. This time, 3 slow knocks. I stayed on the couch, frozen, listening. Nothing. I waited for a few minutes, but no one appeared. I went to sleep, uneasy but telling myself I was overreacting. It escalated after that. The knocks became louder, more insistent. Sometimes it was one knock, sometimes a rapid series. Sometimes it would come in the middle of the night, other times in the early hours of the morning. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the hallway made me jump, every shadow seemed to move. One night, around 2 a.m., the knocks came again. I was sitting on the couch, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. I decided to confront it. I opened the door just a crack, peering out into the hallway. Empty. But then I heard it, a voice, low, almost a whisper. "Let me in." I slammed the door, shaking, and called my friend, who lived nearby. She laughed nervously, saying it was probably a prank or a neighbor messing with me. I didn't believe her. Over the next few nights, the knocking continued, sometimes accompanied by whispers, sometimes silence. But the feeling of being watched never left. I set up a small camera pointed at the door, hoping to catch whoever, or whatever, was responsible. When I reviewed the footage, my stomach dropped. The camera didn't capture a person. It captured the door. And yet, the knock sounded clear, sharp, deliberate. And for one terrifying second, the peephole revealed a pair of eyes staring directly into the camera, wide, unblinking, human-like, but impossibly dark. I didn't sleep that night. I barely slept for days. I avoided the door as much as possible. I stayed in my bedroom with the lock engaged, the lights on, the camera rolling. Then, one night, it changed. Around 1 a.m., I heard the familiar knocking. But this time, it came from inside the apartment. My bedroom door. I froze. My heart stopped. I slowly turned, flashlight shaking, toward the door. And there it was, the knock, coming from the other side. Not once, not twice, but a rapid series, like someone impatient. I backed up, slammed the bedroom door shut, locked it, and grabbed my phone to call 911. But the signal dropped. No service. I was alone. Completely alone. The knocking didn't stop. It continued all night, sometimes a single sharp knock, sometimes a rapid series. Sometimes I thought I heard whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. I stayed in the corner of the room, clutching my flashlight, rocking slightly, tears streaming down my face. Morning came. The knocking stopped. I opened the bedroom door cautiously. Nothing. The apartment was empty. No signs of anyone, no disturbances. Only the camera. I watched the footage again. The last frame chilled me to the bone. The peephole showed the eyes. And behind them, my own reflection, pale, wide-eyed, staring back. I moved out immediately. I've never returned. But sometimes, at night, when I hear a knock on a door, I freeze. My heart races. And I know, deep down, it's still out there, watching, waiting for me. I had just moved into a small townhouse in a quiet neighborhood in Indianapolis. It was a 2-story place with a tiny front yard, 2 bedrooms upstairs, and a living room with a large bay window that faced the street. I loved it at first. Light poured in during the day, the street was quiet at night, and I finally had my own space. But that sense of peace didn't last long. It started one night about 2 weeks after moving in. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. I glanced at the bay window. A face, pale, emotionless, pressed against the glass, staring at me. My heart stopped. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the reflection of a tree, maybe shadows from a passing car. But the next night, it happened again. The same time, the same face, looking directly at me. I stopped looking out that window at night. I closed the blinds, tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched never left. I started locking the doors, checking the perimeter, walking around the yard. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone. Then one night, I woke up to a tapping sound on the window. Slow, deliberate. I froze, heart hammering. I didn't want to look, but curiosity, or fear, forced me to. I pulled the curtain slightly aside. The face was there again. And this time, it was closer. I could see the details: wide eyes, a thin, stretched mouth, and the faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass. My body froze. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug, and when I looked again, the face was gone. I called the police. They checked the neighborhood, the perimeter of the house. Nothing. No one had been seen. No one had entered. No fingerprints, no footprints. They suggested I might be stressed or imagining things. But I knew I wasn't imagining. Over the next week, the face appeared almost nightly. Sometimes it would just linger, staring silently. Other times, it would tap, scratch, or press its hand against the glass. I stopped sleeping in the living room entirely. I even moved my bed to the far corner of the house, away from the window. One night, I was woken by a sound, soft breathing. My heart raced as I turned toward the window. The blinds were moving slightly, though no wind was blowing. I reached out and yanked them aside. The face was there. Close enough that I could see the faint details of its skin, almost translucent, veins visible under the surface. Its mouth moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt them. I felt the terror, the intent. It wanted something from me. I ran from the house that night, leaving the front door unlocked. I spent the night at a friend's place, terrified to return. The next day, I went back to retrieve some belongings. The face was gone. The window was clean, no fingerprints, no smudges, nothing. I moved out immediately. Years later, I drove past that neighborhood. The townhouse was still there, quiet and unassuming. But sometimes, when I pass it at night, I swear I see that face in the window, watching. Waiting. And I know that wherever I am, it remembers me. I moved into an old Victorian house in rural Pennsylvania after college. It was cheap, spacious, and had character: high ceilings, ornate woodwork, and thick walls that made the place feel almost like a castle. My parents warned me about old houses, but I loved it. I thought living alone in a big house would be peaceful. I was wrong. The first sign something was off came on the second night. I was lying in bed when I heard it, a faint whisper coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it was the house settling, pipes expanding. But the whispering didn't sound mechanical. It sounded human. I strained to listen, but I couldn't make out words. Over the next week, the whispers grew louder. I could hear soft murmurs in the kitchen, the living room, even in my bedroom. They were always low, almost as if someone was hiding inside the walls, speaking just to themselves. I started checking the house, tapping on the walls, looking for hidden doors, crawl spaces, anything. Nothing. Then the voices changed. they began repeating my name. Whispering it softly, like a lullaby. Emily, Emily, my name isn't Emily, but the sound chilled me to my core. I realized then that the voices weren't random. They knew I was here. They knew me. I stopped sleeping. I stayed awake at night, lights on, trying to ignore the whispers. I even called a friend to stay over. But the voices didn't care. Even with someone else in the house, I could hear them, soft, cruel, deliberate. Always calling me, always watching. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. I froze, flashlight shaking in my hands. The living room was empty. I followed the sound, tapping on the walls, trying to pinpoint it. That's when I heard it, a knock from inside the wall, right next to the dining room. I leaned close, trembling, listening. Then, in a voice I could barely recognize as human, the wall whispered, "Let me out." I bolted from the house, locked the doors, and didn't return that night. The next day, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was imagining things. Stress, loneliness, the isolation of living alone. But I knew deep down it wasn't my imagination. Over the next week, I moved my things into storage and prepared to leave. That night, I heard the voices again. Louder. Clearer. They weren't whispering this time, they were screaming. Screaming my name, demanding something, threatening me. I grabbed my keys and ran out, leaving the house behind. I never returned. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I swear I can hear whispers through the walls of other houses. I know it sounds insane, but I can feel them. Always watching, always waiting for the next opportunity to speak my name. And I know, if I ever returned to that Victorian house, I would hear it again, calling, always calling. I was living alone in a small, two-story house in upstate New York. It had been my grandmother's, and she passed away a few months before I moved in. I inherited it, and the thought of living in a quiet, secluded place was appealing. I imagined peaceful nights, reading in my living room, listening to the wind outside. I was wrong. The first night, everything seemed normal. I unpacked, arranged my things, and fell asleep early. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. They were light, deliberate, pacing slowly on the floor above me. I froze, heart pounding. My grandmother had passed away, and I was the only one in the house. I told myself it was the old house settling, maybe the wind shifting something. But the footsteps continued every night, always at the same time, always pacing. They never moved randomly. They always walked across the same spots above my bedroom, slow and heavy with purpose. I started keeping a notebook, trying to track patterns. Sometimes the steps would stop suddenly, and I'd hear faint whispers, almost like someone muttering, "She's here, she's awake." The voice didn't make sense, it wasn't my grandmother's, but it sounded human. One night, I decided to confront it. Armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, I climbed the stairs to the second floor. The hallway was empty, silent. I checked each bedroom, the bathroom, closets, nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone, nothing. I returned to my room, exhausted, but the footsteps resumed. This time, louder, heavier. They circled above me like a predator pacing its prey. I realized then that the sound wasn't random, it was watching me, waiting for me to react. I installed cameras in the hallway upstairs, hoping to catch whatever was causing the noise. For a week, nothing appeared on tape. No movement, no shadow, nothing. Yet every night, the footsteps returned. Always pacing, always deliberate, always above me. Then, one night, it changed. I was lying in bed, paralyzed with fear, when the footsteps stopped abruptly. Silence. My heart raced, thinking maybe it was over. But then I heard a sound I'll never forget, a soft, deliberate tapping on the ceiling right above my bed. I jumped out of bed, flashlight shaking, and ran upstairs. The hallway was empty. The bedrooms, closets, everything was empty. But when I looked at the floorboards, I saw something terrifying, faint scratches forming words. "Don't look up." My blood ran cold. I bolted out of the house that night, leaving everything behind. I've never returned. Even now, when I sleep alone, I hear footsteps. Always pacing, always deliberate, always above me, reminding me that wherever I am, I'm never truly alone. And I know that one day, if I ever let my guard down, those footsteps will find me again. I had always loved antique shops. There's something about old furniture, old objects, that feels alive. So, when I found a small mirror tucked away in the corner of a shop in Boston, I couldn't resist. It was tall, framed in dark, carved wood, and had an odd, almost hypnotic quality. The shop owner warned me, laughing, "It's old. Some say mirrors like this have a way of keeping secrets." I didn't think much of it. I brought it home, placed it in my bedroom, and admired the craftsmanship. The first night, I noticed something odd. I was brushing my teeth, and in the mirror, I saw a shadow behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just my bedroom. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was a trick of the light. But the unease lingered. Over the next week, the mirror seemed to change subtly. Reflections appeared distorted, like my face was stretched in unnatural ways, or my hands looked longer than they should. Sometimes, when I passed by quickly, I thought I saw movement in the reflection, something standing behind me, just outside my field of vision. Then the whispers started. Not in the room, but in the mirror. Faint, raspy, like someone breathing directly into the glass. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But the more I looked, the more I heard it. "Come closer, come closer." One night, around 1 a.m., I woke to the sound of tapping. Soft, deliberate, against the mirror's surface. I sat up, heart hammering, and shined my flashlight. Nothing. But then I saw it, my reflection. Or rather, something pretending to be me. My eyes were wide, unblinking, and my mouth moved, whispering words I couldn't understand. I stumbled back, nearly falling. I grabbed my phone and shined it toward the mirror. The reflection mimicked my movements exactly, but its smile grew wider, crueler, and its eyes darker than mine. I didn't sleep that night. I covered the mirror with a sheet, but even then, I felt its presence. I could sense it watching, waiting. The whispers continued, faint but insistent, "Let me out, let me out." The next day, I decided to get rid of the mirror. I moved it to the curb for trash pickup. That night, I slept better, thinking it was over. But the relief didn't last. A week later, I was brushing my teeth again, late at night, in my bathroom mirror. I froze. My bedroom mirror stood in the corner, facing me. The reflection inside it was me. But not quite. Its lips moved, forming words that weren't mine. "I'm still here. You can't escape." I bolted out of the bathroom, tripped over the rug, and ran out into the street, leaving the house behind. I've never returned. Even now, when I see a mirror, I can't help but glance at it twice. I know that wherever that reflection is, it's still waiting for me, waiting for the moment when I'll look, and it can finally step out. I had just moved into an old farmhouse in rural Ohio. It was beautiful in daylight, wide porches, tall windows, and an attic that I initially thought would be perfect for storage. My parents warned me about old houses, especially ones with attics. They said they could feel strange, almost alive. But I was young, independent, and stubborn. I didn't listen. The first night, I unpacked and explored the house. Everything was dusty, silent, and eerily still. I went up to the attic, curious. It was dark, filled with cobwebs and old furniture. I shone my flashlight around, and at first, it seemed perfectly normal. But as I reached the far corner, I felt a sudden chill, like someone had walked past me. I spun around, nothing. Only shadows stretching across the walls. The next night, I was awakened by a sound. Soft, deliberate, pacing footsteps. At first, I thought it was the floorboards settling. But the footsteps were above me, coming from the attic. My stomach sank. I hadn't been up there since earlier, and no one else was supposed to be in the house. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noises. But the footsteps didn't stop. Every night, they came, always around 2 a.m., pacing back and forth above my bedroom ceiling. They were slow, heavy, and deliberate. Sometimes I could swear I heard whispers, faint murmurs that I couldn't quite make out. I started leaving the attic door locked, but it didn't matter. The footsteps continued. I began installing cameras, motion sensors, everything I could think of, but nothing ever appeared on tape. No shadow, no figure, nothing. Just footsteps. Then, one night, curiosity, or fear, made me confront it. I grabbed a flashlight, crept up the stairs to the attic, and slowly opened the door. The room was empty, silent, yet the air felt heavy, oppressive. I shone my flashlight around. Dust motes danced in the beam. Old furniture, trunks, cobwebs. Nothing else. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under my weight. That's when I felt it, cold, heavy, like someone had just brushed past me. I spun around. Nothing. I took a cautious step toward the far corner. And then I saw it, a set of footprints in the dust. Fresh footprints. Leading from the corner toward the stairs. I froze. My heart pounded. I hadn't disturbed the dust, and no one had been up here. The footprints ended at the top of the stairs, and then, nothing. Suddenly, a whisper. Clear, human, coming from the corner of the attic. You shouldn't have come up here. I bolted. Down the stairs, through the house, out the front door. I didn't stop running until I reached the road. My hands shook, sweat pouring down my face. I called the police. They searched the house thoroughly, nothing. No intruder, no footprints, no signs of entry. The next morning, I went back with a friend to retrieve a few things. The attic was empty. The dust was undisturbed. The footprints were gone. Everything seemed normal. But I know they weren't. I know something lives in that attic. Something patient, waiting, pacing, watching. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I swear I hear footsteps above me, pacing slowly, deliberately. And I know, if I ever return to that house, they'll be waiting, and this time, they won't be silent. The worst part? As I was leaving the farmhouse for good, I glanced back at the attic window. For a brief second, I swear I saw a shadow standing there, watching me, smiling, and then disappearing. I haven't slept properly since.